What's going on, team? Proof here, and welcome to my deck guide series for Overdressed Set 1, Genesis of the 5 Greats. And instead of presenting a deck list and talking about it and then going into replays like I normally do, I'm going to do things a little bit differently this time. So I'm going to start with talking about the ride deck and then going over the overall goal of what it's accomplishing. And then after that, I'm going to talk about 3 key cards that are either important for the deck's function or cards that you want to look for in your hand post mulligan. After that, I'm going to go into the general overview of the deck. And then since this is more of a general overview, I want you to keep in mind that the gameplay of the deck can change depending on the matchups. And then I'm going to give a couple pros and cons. And finally, we'll finish things up with a sample deck to tie everything together. So I hope you stick around and I hope you enjoy. And the deck I have for you today is Magnolia. So let's go and hop into it. And the goal of Magnolia's ride deck is to get your units on the board to help you rush your opponent down, to really build up that damage to make your later turns that much more threatening. Because Charis and Lattice can both generate top calls provided you don't miss with them, and then Magnolia can help be a payoff piece because if you get units that are useful in the back row, they can become targets for Magnolia's skill on turn 3 and further into the game. As for the key cards, we have Magnolia, Alenia, and Admantis. Magnolia is key because it becomes your main combo piece you want to have for your Magnolia turns, because it can help you hit over defensives by passing power to some of your other units. And one of the ways it can shine is on your Persona Ride turn. If you have 3 counterblasts and you have 2 Gnoslas on the board in the back row, you can spread their power from Gnosla A to Gnosla B, and then Gnosla B can pass its power to one of your other units as it attacks. So it can be a really deadly finishing combo if you have the counterblast to use. Alenia provides really great tempo early on with the ability to call something from the drop and give it some power, and it's one of the centerpieces of your ability to rush your opponent down early. And Admantis provides early power, and it makes a great revive target for Alenia to be able to spread 10,000 power, and it combos great with Gnosla because you can power up Gnosla with Admantis, and then Gnosla can spread that power to another unit during the course of the turn. For the gameplay overview, as we talked about earlier, you want to develop board to push as much damage as you can so that your smaller attacks later can become much more threatening to your opponent. And then you want to use your Persona Ride turns to close out games with waves of attacks, since Magnolia can give the back row attacking ability to 3 of your units, and if your opponent is at high damage, those can become lethal swings as opposed to being more annoying small things to build up damage. As for the pros, Magnolia has a great ability to rush your opponent down early thanks to the cards we talked about previously, and has the ability to present full boards early to apply pressure to the opponent. And also has a flexible gameplay, allowing you to adapt your attack patterns depending on the situation. For example, if your opponent hits an early defensive trigger, maybe you'll shift to going after rear guards, or maybe you'll use Magnolia's skill to make a booster bigger and then be able to hit over the defensive trigger. You have a lot of different situations where you can flexibly make your columns adapt to the situation. As for the cons, there's heavy resource usage because a lot of the components of the deck use Counterblast, Soul Blast, or both resources. So being able to manage your resources is key to success with Magnolia. As for the other con, there's a lack of card draw, which can lead to running out of steam in the face of decks that can remove your units from the board, because the only ways to gather advantage is through the ride deck or through Alenia. So if your opponent is successful in removing units off your board, it becomes harder to replace them as the game goes on. So that'll do it for the overview. Let's go ahead and get to the sample deck. And I talked about the majority of the sample deck already, but there's a couple cards I want to touch on. Alio is kind of like a flexible order card because you can field it and attack with it one turn and then use the skill on the following turn, or you can just play it from hand and immediately retire it to power up 2 of your units. Duger is just nice raw power and makes for a nice front row unit on Persona Ride turns. Being able to hit for 25k unboosted is a very welcome addition. And it's a unit that has some staying power because it could potentially be 15k on your opponent's turn as long as you can keep your board filled and your rear guards protected. As for the triggers, we have 8 crit, 3 draw, 1 bless favor, 4 heal because it offers maximum pressure with the crit, and you have a few draws in there to help recoup some cards back into your hand. And a note on the ride deck that I wanted to bring up is that you can experiment with Rancor Chain and Husk Dragon, which are the grade 1 and grade 2 from Zorga's ride line, instead of Charis and Lattice. However, using them would require quite a few changes to your deck to accommodate them, so it's not something that we're going to cover in a sample deck setting, but it's something I want you to keep in mind as a possibility in case you want to experiment with it. So the deck really focuses on loading up the board with power as soon as possible to rush your opponent, then really capitalize on that early momentum with Magnolia, enabling your multi-attacks. So that'll do it for the deck guide on Magnolia. I really hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you next time. Peace. Be easy.